Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth webinar in the Nurses Drawdown webinar series focused on the energy action area of Nurses Drawdown. This webinar is being hosted by the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to enter your questions at any time during or after the presentation by entering it into the chat box function, and we'll direct those questions to the panelists at the end in the Q&A portion. This webinar is being recorded and a link will be sent out to those who registered for the webinar. We are also offering one continuing education credit for this webinar. In the follow-up email, you'll receive a link to an evaluation and post-test to complete, and you must complete the evaluation and the post-test to receive the nursing continuing education. This webinar is focused on the energy action area of Nurses Drawdown. And what Nurses Drawdown is it couples the science-based climate solutions from Project Drawdown with the power of nurses around the world to push for change. In Nurses Drawdown, there's 5 key areas of action based off those solutions presented in Project Drawdown. And Nurses Drawdown intends to engage both nurses already taking action to combat climate change, as well as those who are looking to get more involved and are not quite sure what to do. So on the website, we pulled together suggested action areas in each key focus area, and they incorporate differing levels of action, ranging from simple actions that you can take on a personal level to larger actions that can be taken either within your organization or as a collective. And so nurses are welcome to fit what makes sense for them. Since this webinar is focused on the energy area, I just wanted to give a really brief overview of why this is so important when we think about health and when we think about climate change. Throughout the whole life cycle of fossil fuel and other non-renewable energy, we see impacts to land, air, water, and with that, human health risk and impacts. Shifting to renewable energy sources such as wind and solar not only has benefits for the climate, but also has tremendous benefits for human health. And our speakers are going to touch on more about that. Fossil fuels such as coal, petroleum, and natural gas are our main sources of energy, producing the vast majority of fuel, electricity, and heat used by people around the world. And the energy supply sector is the largest contributor of global greenhouse gas emissions. And there are many actions that nurses can take in this action area to help draw down carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions. These include transitioning to clean and renewable energy, promoting energy efficiency, and advocating for a divestment from fossil fuels. In addition, we are thinking about transitioning, and as we transition to clean renewable energy, we need to make sure that transition is just and equitable. So we have an amazing lineup of nurse speakers who are going to share what they're doing in this action area and how they are taking action around energy choices and health. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Wanda Martin. Dr. Martin is an associate professor in the College of Nursing at the University of Saskatchewan, Canada. Her work engages systems thinking and the use of novel methodologies addressing public health programs for applied outcomes. Her program of research is on the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically focused on health equity, food systems, and climate change. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Martin.
Great, thank you so much. I will share my. There we go. So really, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I don't specifically study energy systems, but I tend to live it a little more. So I will give you a bit of a breakdown of how we're trying to live sustainably here. Just to put it in a bit of context, where I am in Canada is in the middle of the country and more or less in the middle of the province, just a little bit south of the middle. And what we're really looking at here from climate change issues are around the temperature increasing, of course, which may sound like a good idea from a Canadian perspective, but it is going to cause a lot of problems with evaporation and drought and so on. So we will get more rain, but overall we anticipate a drier climate because of the evaporation. And so the soil moisture will be decreasing, which if you think about Canada and global food supplies and sending wheat around the world, most of it is actually grown in this province. So there is a potential for some food and food security implications worldwide on the basis of our growing season, which will be longer, but we're going to need more water to actually irrigate more. So, which is something we don't generally do on the large scale. So there will be some water flow issues as well, and we're expecting more extreme events and drought being our most significant and serious. However, on the upside, we do get a tremendous amount of sunshine, and in almost the most in all of Canada. Between Alberta and Saskatchewan, we get a lot of sunshine, so that gives us an opportunity. The other problem that we have is that of energy poverty. And so households that actually spend more than 6% of their after-tax income on energy services are considered being experiencing energy poverty. And in the city that I am in, Saskatoon has a 16% energy poverty rate. So we want to be quite mindful of that too, that we can have an immediate effect by improving our energy efficiency with people who are sitting in that category, and at the same time helping with the climate change impacts. I really like this. I quite like the one that Jessica put up as well, but understanding those health outcomes on the basis of energy. A lot of people haven't quite made those connections yet. And so this really lays out when you have unaffordable energy bills and impaired access and extreme temperatures, what those impacts can lead and how that leads to health outcomes is really something important to keep in mind, I think, as nurses. So the number one thing that you can do, of course, is to be more energy efficient and understand that all energy is going to have a cost. So when we talk about solar, for example, there is a cost to solar, but the cost is not as high as fossil fuel use. So if we can actually use less energy, then we are hopefully getting a little bit ahead of the game. And when we look at our energy use as a population, it is really what's going on in our buildings is one of the biggest things that can be improved. So how do we actually improve energy efficiency of buildings? We can, for the existing housing stock, we can do retrofitting. So we need better windows, we need more insulation and ventilation, and it needs to be airtight. And that will help to keep things cool if you're in a hot climate and keep things warm if you're in a colder climate. And then how do we help people who can't really take on that extra loan? There's financing methods. One is called PACE financing, where the municipality actually is the owner of that loan and helps the household, and the loan is attached to the taxes and attached to the property. So the homeowner isn't stuck trying to bear the burden of a loan. It just it stays with the building and with the property itself. So there are more and more innovative ways in order to actually help people to achieve retrofitting their home. In Saskatchewan, we were actually the first province to develop this energy efficient housing standard, and it was back in the 1970s. For those who remember the energy crisis at that time, group of researchers came together and they developed what's known as the conservation house, and they really worked on how to get the most energy efficient building as possible. And then Canada, in its infinite wisdom, sort of dropped the ball, and Germany picked it up, and the passive house standard was advanced in Germany, but really on the basis of what we had started here in Saskatchewan. So a group of us came together a while ago now, and we built this 2 years ago, but it was a long time in the process. So I'm part of a co-housing group called Radiance, which is 8 families that came together. We became our own development company, and we worked with an architect, designer, and an engineer, and we developed a passive house co-housing. So let me talk you through a little bit about what this is. So passive house standard has that solar orientation, and high insulation, high performance windows, air-tight enclosure, and a balanced ventilation with heat recovery. So those are the key elements to passive house. Our units actually use 90% less space heat than the average and only cost about 6% more to build. We have the standard 2x4 walls, and then outside of that, we have 11 inches of insulation. So you can see the differences in what we've achieved. So our 50 or our 60 walls, our 50 floor, and an R100 roof compared to the industry standards there. We have triple pane south-facing windows, and you'll notice a fair overhang on the roof. So there were solar diagrams to understand where the sun sits differently in different times of year. So when the sun is high, we get shade on our windows, and in the winter, when the sun is low, we get sun pretty much halfway into the building, which means we can sit in the sun in the winter and have a nice cozy time. For those of you who aren't aware, our winters can get down to -40. We kind of sit at a -20 for January, February, and in the summer we can get up to like +30 or slightly higher, but we sort of sit around, sort of that high 20s mark in our average summer. And so this is like living in a thermos. And when it gets, it's slow to cool down and slow to heat up, but it stays at that temperature when you get it there. And so we pull the blinds in the summer, and we have everything open wide in the winter, so we can have a lot of solar gain. So we can use a lot less space heating than normal. So most houses in Canada, outside of the lower mainland in BC perhaps, but most of us have furnaces. This building does not have a furnace, so there's no fossil fuel use at all in this townhouse. We all have energy efficient appliances, hot water recovery system for people who have a bathroom upstairs. We have a heat pump, which does our heating and cooling, heat pump hot water heater, condensing dryers, and LED lighting throughout. So as energy efficient as we possibly can be. To hold with the sustainability approach with the building, we have permaculture grounds. So this was early plantings. We've got a bit more going on in there now. And we actually have a 9,000 liter water tank to do rainwater catchment that help to irrigate the grounds. So you can read more about us, and I'm happy to take any questions on co-housing. We each have our own unit for co-housing, and then the one on the end with the balcony is the common house that we share. We also have an electric car that sits in our yard. It actually belongs to the Saskatoon Car Share Co-op, so it gets maximum usage through co-op members. The car share was part of a program called Renewable Rides, in which we had funding with the Sustainable Saskatoon Environmental Society to put solar panels on the roof that could power a fleet of cars across the city. So there's 5 electric cars that are actually in that fleet. We actually purchased half of this as well, so we get the privilege of having it right in our yard. But it's our solar panels that feed into the grid that power this. So our solar panels, we do have 126 38 kilowatt solar PV array, and it actually doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the Saskatchewan Environmental Solar Co-op. So you're might be sensing a bit of a trend here. We have co-housing, and we have the car share co-op and the solar co-op going on at the same time. It is a consumer co-op, and members purchase a common share and then as many preferred shares as they would like. So I only have a couple, but it's one way to think about how I can support the electricity that I do use could be offset by that. And each shareholder is entitled to dividends from selling power back to the grid, but to date, the solar co-op is relatively young, and so the money has been reinvesting into more projects. So this is our full solar array, and you can tell this is during construction. We just got the solar panels up and we're quite excited. The average Saskatchewan household uses 8,700 kilowatts per year, and that would be about 15 shares in the solar co-op. And they have seven projects right now. There's another co-housing unit that has them, and they're just growing exponentially, trying to generate as much solar power as possible. There are other types of shared energy systems that are really quite interesting. And if you take a look at the Blanchford community in Edmonton, they had an airfield that they were repurposing. So they designed it specifically with sustainability in mind. And they have a district energy sharing system, which is geothermal. And so that's a centralized system just for that community for heating and cooling. They also have high performance buildings. They've got a sewer heat exchange, which I thought was quite interesting, and we don't hear enough or see enough around that. And it's really about sustainability by design, so walkable and close to transit and focused on community. One of the problems we have in Saskatoon is that we're not very walkable at all, and they're trying to improve the transit and so on, but being a relatively small place, that's very challenging for cities. So to design for sustainability is the key, I think. So what does this mean for nurses? Really start by reducing energy use as much as possible. You really want to advocate for all buildings to be high performance with good ventilation systems. And that, not only, you can understand the ventilation issues around mold. And when we have in Canada, particularly with the freeze and thaws, we can end up with a lot of mold in some houses, and so better ventilation and air tightness actually would improve people's health regardless of energy. We need better incentives for homeowners to invest in energy efficiency, so whether that's through PACE financing or other energy incentivizing programs would be really important. It'd be really nice to set up more home energy advisors and energy assistant programs so that people can have someone come in and do an assessment and help them to understand where they can best improve the energy use in their home. We really need to be advocating for walkable neighborhoods, so there's less need for vehicles on the road, and improve that walking and cycling infrastructure, which of course is health co-benefits. And encouraging cities to invest in the electric bus and the car share co-ops. And really, the car, I haven't owned a car since I began nursing school, so 1997. And I was privileged to live in an area that I didn't need one for quite a number of years. And here, Saskatoon, I really do need one to pick up some bigger items, and so the car share has been fantastic for that. So I still don't have to own one. So you want to really think about what what's going on with your power company? Do they have targets for renewable energy, and what are those targets, and how do we hold them accountable to reach those targets? Is your area actually right for solar? Because while Saskatchewan obviously is prime for solar, some place like Seattle might not be quite have as good of a return on investment there. So really thinking about what are the renewable alternatives in the area in which you are living. What is the National Energy Code for buildings in your area, and can your local governments set targets that for net zero for new construction? Which will really exceed those codes. So really encouraging that policy change to exceed the standards rather than just meet them. And if you have an opportunity to get involved with any new developments, to really encourage that long-term thinking and putting in the voice of the health effects. I think a lot of engineers haven't really gotten on board with what that means, that their developments have health effects, and we have a really great opportunity to provide that voice. So nice to get involved. And that is that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. What a fantastic example of solutions to climate change and kind of solving our energy concerns from this very holistic and systems thinking approach, which I think is very typical of nurses. So that's fantastic. And I'm going to turn it over to our second speaker here, who is Maribel Castillon. She's a public health nurse for the Los Angeles County Child Health and Disability Prevention Program. Since 2016, Maribel has co-chaired the first member-driven SEIU 721 Environmental Justice Action Team, and she continuously empowers members by inviting them to engage in addressing local environmental justice issues and collaborating with government officials to improve the quality of life for people living in Los Angeles County, California, in the US. So I'll turn it over to you, Maribel.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for the previous presentation. That was very insightful. So my intention today with my presentation is to share my journey in terms of how I got to where I am now, and hopefully inspire other nurses to also maybe use some of the ideas that I used. So I'm going to be focusing on oil and gas in California, but before that, I want to share a little bit of back history so we can understand where it all started from. So back in 2018, there was a report by the American Lung Association that basically said that Los Angeles and Long Beach are the #1 most polluted cities in California. And then they broke it down to different aspects, air pollution, climate change, water. And we've added on to this list since then. But under air pollution, you can see oil refineries and backyard oil drilling being one of the major causes that contribute to air pollution. And of course, we have our wonderful freeways here in LA, and in the picture in the top left corner, you can actually see a truck, 76 gas truck there. So this slide here just shows, some of the impacts of pollution for, those nurses who may be new to this and understand, what the complications are. And this slide and information from Duke Medical School does a good job in mentioning what the short-term effects are and the long-term effects, and of course, who's most affected. And as we know, now with COVID, the people with chronic conditions are the most vulnerable when it comes to viruses like COVID and/or air pollution. And of course, we have seniors, children, pregnant women, and people who are either exercise or maybe even work outdoors. Some of the short-term effects can be headaches, nose, throat, eyes, inflammation, irritation, coughing, breathing, painful breathing, pneumonia, bronchitis, and even skin irritation. And of course, some of the long-term effects can be central nervous systems, headaches, anxieties, cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, impacts on the liver, and impacts on the reproduction system. So I have faith that many of us who are on this webinar at this time already know this information. This is just, to repeat some of the information. So I've been active in my union for many years now, and SEIU has many locals throughout California. And this slide here lists the different unions in California. And a few years back, my co-chair at the time and I started talking about, in the environment and what we can do as a union. And at that time, there was information that was abstracted using the EnviroScreen, where we used the location of all of our locals within California and included the number of members in those areas. And what we found was that there is a percentage of members living in most burdened census tracts as identified through the EnviroScreen. So in our locals, the ones that I highlighted here, that's the local that I belong to, which is SEIU 721. And in the city of LA, there's 74% of members who live in burdened areas, LA County 48.1, Orange County, and these are the different areas that we cover. So, we started thinking like, what can we do as a union to, combat some of these issues and or bring it to the attention of our members. So my partner and co-chair is an environmental activist and has been for many years. He came up with the solution of creating a side letter with the CEO of LA County, basically saying that as a union, we want to contribute in finding solutions to environmental pollution, which includes air, land, water, along the lack of access of affordable housing. So this letter was signed by our president and also signed by, at that time, the chief executive officer of LA County. So this letter here is an appendix, is in the appendix of our contract. So this letter here allows us as a union to be able to participate in things related to the environment. So back in January 2016, we created the Environmental Justice Action Team. And on January 20th, we introduced our first meeting. And at that time, our first meeting dealt with Exide, which is a battery recycling plant. But we, continued to evolve, and we reached out based on that side letter that was created. We reached out to county officials, and in the left top corner there, the gentleman with the black jacket, he is the director, or was the director at the time, for the Department of Public Health Environment department, basically. And he would come in and educate us on what was happening within LA County, where we can collaborate and work together. And at that time, like I said, we were focused on the Exide battery recycling plant, and SEIU California supported the ask of LA County for the state to provide $176.6 million for the cleanup. In 2016, SEIU had its convention in Detroit. And at this time, or during these conventions, which take place every 4 years, there are resolutions that are created and voted and accepted. And there was a resolution, which was Resolution 108A, which is the environmental justice for working people. And basically what it says is, therefore, be it resolved, SEIU will join the fight to make a clean air and water a human right for environmental justice in all communities and to combat climate change, united with organizations of common interest. So this resolution then serves as guidance for all the other SEIUs locals throughout the United States and Canada, because we are also in Canada, and also helps for those locals who may be interested in creating their own environmental justice committees in their locals. So we developed a work plan within our local at 721, which included a goal, a strategy, and a plan of action. Now, during this time, we were inviting guests to come to our monthly meetings and educate us, because, when it comes to the environment, there's a lot of things that one can focus on, and sometimes the information could be a little intimidating and feel sometimes overwhelming. So we would invite leaders and professionals in the subject matter that we were interested in learning to come and talk to us about it. During this time, we invited someone from Stand LA, which is an organization here in LA that is, fighting for clean air and awareness when it comes to urban oil drilling and the dangers of it, and also pushing for a setback of 2,500 feet from any active urban oil drilling sites. So we would also use opportunities like member meetings, to educate our members on who we are, what we did, and why it's important to be involved. We use Facebook to reach out to our members. We had flyers. And of course, during our the whole COVID thing, we transitioned over to Zoom meetings, and actually we have not missed one meeting at all because of COVID. Sometimes we have rescheduled meetings, but for other reasons. But we've been moving on forward regardless. So some of the allies that we have worked with thus far, like I had mentioned earlier, is Stand LA, and that is an organization focused here in Los Angeles, and the acronym stands for Stand Together Against Neighborhood Drilling. Another ally that we worked with and advocated with is the Torrance Refinery Action Alliance. And also, most recently, we are involved with the Green New Deal Network Coalition. So with Stand LA, we had a member come in and speak to us about, who they are, what they do, what they represent. And the information that we learned was fascinating. Here in this slide, the upper left corner picture is an old picture from the 1930s of where is Signal Hill, and all these little spikes that you see, those are all oil drilling sites back then. And for those who may not know, LA was like the show, the Beverly Hillbillies, where there was so much oil here in LA. There's a section in Los Angeles where there's a La Brea Tar Pits Park where they have it's gated out, and they have like these looks like mammoths who are in there and stuck in the oil, and it was just brooding from a lot of places. So now the picture on the top right corner is also Signal Hill, and of course we have homes, residents, and right there in their backyard, a few feet away, are actual active oil drilling cranes, as you can see. The bottom left corner with the little boy playing basketball, in the background, that tower that you see there, that is also an oil site that has been covered up and masqueraded in nice art to hide that is an oil site there. But you can see how close it is to where people live and play and go to school. The picture on the right, on the bottom right corner, is a map of LA County, and it just shows the different oil site areas throughout LA County. Some of these may not be active, but they're still here. And in the bottom, there's a website there if you're interested in learning more about Stand LA and their mission and more information about them. So one of the things that I was able to do with Stand LA is support them in their request to have LA County Department of Public Health conduct a study. So back in 2018, LA County Department of Public Health conducted a study in different areas where there's urban oil drilling sites to see if there was any harmful effects of, for being so close to them. So a 48-page report was created, and on the right-hand side here is a table that shows some of the findings in terms of, depending on where the oil site is, how, and the distance from where people may live, what is it that you can see. So, of course, the closer that you live to this, the more at risk it is, people are to being exposed to, the air quality, the noise, the odor. And so this is an official document, and the website in the bottom provides information on where to obtain the report. Another person that we had come and speak to us at our meetings, our monthly meetings, was a representative from the Torrance Refinery Alliance, Action Alliance, who was actually also an SEIU 721 retired member. And she mentioned, she educated us, and up until then, I was not aware of what had happened, in one of the refineries here in LA, and actually it was Exxon refinery, where there was an explosion, and I believe 4 people were hurt during this explosion, and the amount of ash that was released into the air, was pretty severe. You could see here on the slide to the right, the cars there and the amount of ash that has landed on them. So one of the things that we were asked was to support the Torrance Refinery Alliance in having 2 refineries here in LA convert from using hydrochloric acid in the production of the oil that they were refining to something that is more safe. Because one of the things that I wasn't aware of is the hydrochloric acid that is used in some of these refineries are actually, brought from other places and moved in big, tank trucks. And for those who may not remember from chemistry, hydrochloric acid is extremely dangerous. If it's released, it can cause a cloud, a poisonous cloud, and kill everything in its path. So we have trucks on our freeways, transporting this, taking it to refineries. And then we have situations like this that can happen. Now, some of the media stated that the explosion of the Torrance refinery back in 2015 was described by federal regulators as a serious near miss, meaning that if it had not been controlled and or if it was bigger than what it really was, than what had happened, there would have been a lot more deaths and injuries caused by it. So after we received this report and were educated, we took our the information and we spoke to our executive board members and told them the importance of being able to support what the Torrance Refinery Alliance was trying to do. So a letter was created back in 2018 and signed by our president that basically said that SEIU 721 supported a proposed rule, which was 1410, that replaces hydrochloric acid and the modified hydrochloric acid with a safer alternative within 4 years of rule of adoption. Now, this letter was introduced to the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Unfortunately, there was a lot of pushback at that time, and the measure was not passed. But, having the support of a union like my local, which is a pretty big local, is really, it's a good feeling. The other area,
Maribel, I'm so
yes,
sorry. We just
that's
have
okay.
about 1 more minute.
Okay, I'm almost done here.
Oh,
So
sorry
another
about that.
area where we're involved in right now is a Thrive agenda, and it has multiple pillars. Pillar 5 and 6 focus on the environment and climate catastrophe, and this basically, can address the issues of some of the LA abandoned oil wells in LA County. There's multiple people in that coalition, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maribel. It's just so amazing to see that journey throughout the start of the Environmental Justice Action Team and the way you've been able to organize your members and really kind of put your union out front on the forefront of advocating to address oil and gas drilling in the state. I'm going to turn it over to our final speaker, who is Dr. Jessica Fisher. Dr. Fisher is a transplant surgery nurse practitioner and research professional with a DNP focused in adult gerontological nurse practitioner from the University of Minnesota. She is an advocate for climate change reform and bringing the voice of healthcare to the public debate on clean energy, fossil fuel related pollution, and our changing climate. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Fisher.
Thank you. Let me just share my presentation. All right, so today I'm here to talk to you about Pipeline 3 infrastructure as well as the health risks, and I'm here on behalf of health professionals for a healthy climate. So here you can see the boreal forest of the Athabasca River Basin in Alberta, Canada. Here you see an image of the untouched boreal forest in Alberta before any tar sands mining or extracting projects have been built. Boreal means northern regions, so boreal forests are only found in northern regions such as Canada. They play an important role in the reduction of climate change impacts by capturing twice as much carbon dioxide as tropical forests to help regulate the planet's climate. In Canada, those forests are stripped away in surface mining. And here you can see after extraction. So tar sands extraction turns the landscape into a wasteland. People who work on the rigs report it feeling like you're on another planet. 54% of the world's remaining boreal forest is in Canada. And sadly, almost 2 million acres of forest were lost or degraded in the tar sands region between 2000 and 2012. This deforestation rate exceeds even that of the Brazilian rainforest. Not only is the boreal forest's ability to absorb carbon dioxide in the future impaired, but carbon stored in disturbed forest areas has also been released in the atmosphere, contributing to climate change. The current average annual capacity of the entire Pipeline 3 mainline system is approximately 3 million barrels per day out of Western Canada. The Line 3 replacement project will cost approximately $8.2 billion and is the largest project in Enbridge's history. So Enbridge is the company that is responsible for Pipeline 3. It involves replacing all remaining segments of Line 3 between Hardisty and Superior with 1,031 miles of new large barrel pipe. And when completed, the Line 3 pipeline will move approximately 760,000 barrels per day. At this point, construction has been completed on segments in Canada and Wisconsin, and Minnesota is the remaining holdout. The route in orange is where Enbridge has 7 existing pipelines, including the old Line 3. Line 3's proposed new route, seen in green, will be 337 miles long, crossing 192 bodies of water, including the headwaters of the Mississippi River. So though I'll talk a lot about Minnesota, this will impact other parts of the country as well, and Canada and Wisconsin. And at this time, all necessary state and federal permits have been issued for the pipeline, though there are still several legal appeals that are currently in process. Construction began in December and is approximately 50% completed, but it's currently on hiatus until around June 1st due to seasonal restrictions. So once the permits were granted, Enbridge has been working kind of day and night to try to get this completed as fast as possible while the legal process is still, unfolding. And once operating at capacity, line 3 will generate 193 million tons of CO2 equivalents per year. And you can see here, all of Minnesota in 2016 generated 154 CO2 equivalents per year. So it's pretty substantial. 193 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions is equivalent to adding 50 new coal-fired electricity power plants. And currently we only have 4 in Minnesota. And it's also equivalent to adding 38 million vehicles to our roads, which currently have 7 million in Minnesota. So line 3 poses unacceptable health risks. Those 193 million tons of carbon emissions are deadly air pollutants. Air pollution from burning fossil fuels causes 7 million deaths annually, more than all of the deaths of TB, malaria, and AIDS combined, according to the World Health Organization. And a new article from The Guardian covered a new study that showed that air pollution caused by burning fossil fuels such as coal and oil was responsible for 8.7 million deaths globally in 2018, and a staggering 1 in 5 of all people who died that year. The 8.7 million deaths in 2018 represent a key contributor to the global burden of mortality and disease, states the study. The death toll exceeds the combined total of people who die globally each year from smoking tobacco, plus those who die from malaria. And without fossil fuel emissions, the average life expectancy of the world's population would increase by more than a year, while global economic and health costs would fall by about $2.9 trillion. So I know some of the other speakers have also talked about health impacts. Emissions from line 3 will exacerbate climate change, and the effects of climate change are and will continue to result in increased morbidity and mortality due to extreme weather. We will see increased cardiovascular and respiratory illness related to poor air quality and heat waves, and this will be particularly dangerous to those with chronic diseases like COPD and chronic heart failure. And because ragweed seasons have increased by 11 to 27 days a year throughout the US, those with asthma are at risk, with children being more vulnerable. We will see an increased risk of cancer due to harmful exposure from UV rays as our ozone degrades. And there will be shifting of vector-borne, like West Nile malaria and Lyme disease, food-borne and waterborne disease pathways, including the risk of more pandemics like we've seen with COVID. There are other health impacts that aren't quite as obvious though. Climate change is expected to lead to 200 million more forced migrations by 2050, which contribute to civil conflict. The civil conflict could potentially lead to increased violence due to lack of food and water security. Climate change effects also compromise mental well-being with conditions like depression, anxiety, anger, hopelessness, PTSD, and uncertainty. And familial, financial, and societal impacts are often unquantifiable and difficult to articulate. And who is most vulnerable? That would be children, the elderly, pregnant women, people with pre-existing mental health conditions, as well as those in poverty and the homeless. And health professionals like us will also feel these impacts because we are at the forefront of emergent care and crisis response. Migration leads to changing patient population with more complex health needs. Think language barriers, lack of insurance, and histories of trauma. There is also the issue of limited health resources and greater patient needs. According to one particularly poignant quote from Costello in The Lancet in 2009, "The rich will find their world to be more expensive, inconvenient, uncomfortable, disrupted, and colorless. In general, more unpleasant and unpredictable. Perhaps greatly so. The poor will die." All right. So this map on the right models the spill risks into bodies of water that surround line 3 along its proposed route. Canadian tar sands oil, also known as bitumen, is a thicker and heavier than conventional sweet crude oil. To facilitate flow through the pipelines of this bitumen, it's mixed with a proprietary diluent to create what's called dilbit. And the composition of this diluent is a trade secret, but it's often composed of natural gas condensate, which contains carcinogens such as benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene, collectively known as BTEX. Bitumen sinks in bodies of water, making it more difficult to clean when there is a spill. And spill poses acute health risks as well because of the diluent that can then volatilize. So respiratory impacts, neurological impacts, and nausea have all been reported at spill sites. Line 3 disproportionately harms indigenous communities. The route that Enbridge has approved for crosses vital hunting grounds, numerous trout streams, watersheds, and nearly 43 wild rice lakes. In the event of even a pinhole leak, it's reasonable to imagine that these may be damaged. The route crosses ceded lands from the 1854, 55, and 1863 treaties. These are lands where many native Anishinaabe people retain the right to hunt, fish, and gather. Their rights, also called usufructuary rights, which means the right to benefit from the land even if you don't directly own it, are impacted as well. A pipeline spill or even a disruptive pipeline construction could make it impossible for Indigenous people to exercise their rights here, which would again break treaty rights. And there's also, lesser talked about impacts like gender-based violence. The 2019 final report on the Canadian National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls found substantial evidence of a correlation between resource extraction and violence against Indigenous women and girls. Since construction of Line 3 began in Minnesota, 2 pipeline workers have been arrested in sex trafficking stings, in which the offenders believed they were interacting with a 16-year-old girl. Enbridge was required to create a public safety fund as a stipulation of the permitting process, and already a women's shelter along the pipeline route has requested reimbursement for hotel rooms to shelter at least 2 women who were assaulted by pipeline workers. There are also reports of local women experiencing sexual harassment from pipeline workers at businesses in these communities. So health professionals for a healthy climate have kind of focused on 3 regulatory bodies in Minnesota to try to stop this pipeline. One of them was Minnesota Public Utilities, who were responsible for routing permits, which were unfortunately approved. Another avenue that we tried to take was going through Governor Walz. Health professionals for a healthy climate got together with other scientists like geologists, psychologists, and physicians to kind of highlight the science denial that was going on and discuss with him how detrimental this pipeline would be to the health of Minnesotans. We also tried to use COVID risks, because with COVID, Governor Walz had executive power to, make big decisions that could harm Minnesotans. As you can imagine, with a pipeline, it brings tons of workers in, and that includes from Canada, from other states, which, ultimately ended up leading to COVID outbreaks along the pipeline, and Governor Walz declined to do anything about it. Finally, we tried to go through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. They had to give permits to approve the safest route and a certificate of need saying that we need the oil in Minnesota. And that was basically the basis for the certificate, which was then approved. Interestingly, the Minnesota Department of Commerce said we don't need the oil and is currently suing the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for this. The court case is ongoing, and we should have something around June 23rd, but it is pretty interesting that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency still approved these permits despite all the evidence. And the majority, if you can see the article that I have here on the left, shows that the majority of the MPCA advisory group resigned in protest of the agency's Line 3 decision, saying that they cannot continue to legitimize and provide cover for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's war on Black and Brown people. So here is a picture of me and other health professionals visiting one of the sites, construction sites along the pipeline up in northern Minnesota, near the Mississippi River on treaty land of the Anishinaabe people. And, just kind of discussing lessons learned and things that can still be done. It's kind of starting to feel hopeless because, all the permits have been approved and they're quickly completing construction of the pipeline. However, we still are trying to appeal to President Biden, who's kind of our last hope. And it is kind of reassuring that he did just sign the executive order to stop the Keystone pipeline. So we really need to draw our attention to another oil pipeline under construction here in Minnesota that will carry the same dirty tar sands and have a similar amount of 760,000 barrels of oil per day. So I'm just going to plug to sign a petition if you also feel strongly about this pipeline to try to appeal to Biden to stop the construction. I think kind of discussing lessons learned from all this, it's kind of hard to learn the harsh reality that money really does rule the world. And just because we have the evidence and the experts to say that this is going to be harmful does not mean that these regulatory bodies in our legislature will necessarily follow that, unfortunately. Even here in Minnesota, which is a blue state, the legislators aren't kind of following the science. Anyway, I think one good thing is that sustained public pressure from all over the country and just making a ruckus really did have an impact on the Keystone pipeline, and potentially that could be our last hope is, everyone getting together and saying we really don't want this. But if I would give some advice, it would be to find your own front line, become more aware of things that are going on in your community and what's happening and how you can get involved. One thing that I have to say is I kind of got involved a little bit late in this process in fighting the pipeline. I wish I would have known sooner kind of what's going on in my own backyard. And so I encourage you all to find your own pipeline. And if you are in Minnesota, we have a direct action, or near Minnesota or want to travel to us, we have a direct action coming up June 5th through 8th to go to the construction site and continue to make a ruckus and try to fight this pipeline. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher, for your advocacy around the line through pipeline, as well as the other advocacy of the health professionals and health professionals for healthy climate. I popped both of the links in the chat that Dr. Fisher mentioned, the petition to sign, as well as information about the planned direct action that she mentioned on June 5th through 8th. And with that, we'd have a few minutes for Q&A, and I do have some questions in the chat here. Athen, I'm not quite sure what your question is referring to, so if you don't mind elaborating a little bit, and then I can pose that to the panelists. We do have a question from Julie that is asking, who are the entities that are leading the lawsuits in the Midwest related to the pipeline?
Yeah, so it's the Department of Commerce, and then some of the the Anishinaabe people and some of the other indigenous peoples who are affected by the pipeline and infringing on their treaty rights and their land are the kind of holdouts that hopefully we will get some headway in here.
And I also see more of a comment from Claire, but Dr. Martin, I wonder if you might have some insights into this, just mentioning that retrofitting old houses is extremely difficult, basically because they weren't really built, like new ones. And then also, lots of lack of knowledge by contractors of building science, and just not great availability of products for vendors within the US. So I don't know if you have any insight about retrofitting in old homes.
Yeah, yes, because we also work with a company that does that as well. And I looked into that when radiance started to fall apart at one point, and what would it take to retrofit. But it is a big challenge. The construction industry doesn't have the knowledge that it needs to move forward, which is why we need more people at the table who can start to push for that. We got our insulation actually from Germany. We're part of a pilot project. So the supplies, they wanted to break into the North American market, and it's a wood-based, it's a result of the lumber industry. It's a fiber pressed insulation. So you end up with the need for companies. There was only 2 companies in Canada that could supply our windows. and we're not 100% happy with the company we went with, right? So you end up with, like, there's a real opportunity for growth in the whole construction industry, and it's expensive to retrofit. So for some of the houses I know in our city, it's cheaper to tear the house down and build new. And then what does that mean in terms of recycle, reuse, and so on? But yeah, I absolutely agree with Claire's comments there.
And I know, Dr. Fisher, you have to jump, so I'm just gonna skip a couple questions and just jump to this one because it's directed towards you. What is a good response to those who argue line 3 is needed due to existing aging, leaky infrastructure?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think one of the arguments I would use would be to, then we should, replace the old leaky stuff, not create a brand new route that disrupts even more land. One thing is that even though we granted these new permits, we're not requiring Enbridge to do any upkeep on the old leaky line. So, building this new line will not necessarily help us at all with the old aging leaky line. It will just open us up to more oil spills. And in addition, Minnesota really doesn't need the oil. We're moving to cleaner energy. And so why continue to introduce old tar sands that are, obsolete?
Thank you. And then I'll do one final question, and I'll have pose this to Maribel first, and then if the other Dr. Martin or Dr. Fisher want to hop in, please feel free. Is there a toolkit available for nurses who want to go to their local municipalities where there are new developments that can jeopardize the health of citizens in our environment? It's, a lot of work to be done. And it would make it a lot easier for others to advocate.
Hi, yeah, that's a great question. Personally, I'm not aware of any, especially because, depending on who you're working with or where you're going to, what city, municipality, they may have different, requirements and things of that sort. But I'm eager to see what other people reply, the other panelists. Thank you.
I just threw a Minnesota 350 action toolkit in the chat. I mean, that's specific to Minnesota, but I would guess that other states have, other 350 states have similar toolkits.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any specifically on how, but it is about how do you work with your municipalities and how do you get sitting at the table with the people you don't normally see. So if we can interface more with people that aren't within the health circle, we can start to influence their thinking around health.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I just want to give a final thank you to our 3 fantastic speakers and for all of you for joining today. I hope that this has been inspiring to you all and gives you ideas of what you can do in the energy action area of Nurses Drawdown. And if you haven't joined Nurses Drawdown, I encourage you to go to nursesdrawdown.org and get more involved and hear more stories from other nurses who are taking action in the energy action area as well as the 4 other action areas. So thank you so much. And just a reminder, you will get an email with a link to the evaluation and post-test and information how you can obtain 1 nursing CE. Thank you so much, everyone.